Well, moving on with the news, and thousands of demonstrators in the U.S. city of Chicago condemned the police killing of an African-American teenager by a white police officer in 2014. The protesters, outraged over the fatal shooting of 17-year-old LaQuan McDonald, slammed U.S. policing as racially biased. The demonstrators demanded justice for McDonald, whose tragic death video was published on Tuesday and caused nationwide outcry. Officer Dyke shot the black teenager 16 times and kept shooting after the teen fell to the ground. Dyke was charged with first-degree murder and denied bail at the Tuesday hearing in Chicago's main criminal courthouse. The officer faces 20 years to life in prison if convicted. The U.S. has been gripped by a spike in police brutality against the people of color over the past couple of years. Well, we're going live to Colorado Springs, where the shooting incident happened. Apparently, there is a press conference by the police, so let's listen into that.
Exactly how many victims there are, and we'll be reporting on that in the near future.
I might add that there's a lot of agencies that helped out this afternoon besides the Colorado Springs Police Department. We have federal authorities here, federal, state resources, and this was, like I said, a very tough afternoon, but we had help from everybody in the community, in the region, and the state. Thank you.
I'd also like to, hold on one moment. I'd like to, if you guys can step back. Yep. Chief Chris Riley, R-I-L-E-Y, with the Colorado Springs Fire Department.
Well, good evening, everyone. Just to add to what Chief Carey said, it's been a very challenging afternoon. Fire, police resources, and law enforcement, public safety from all different levels throughout the area have worked very well together. We established a unified command early on, but thankfully the situation at this time has been resolved, but our hearts and our prayers go out to the family of the loved ones of the victims that were involved in today's event. So it's been a very difficult day, but our first responders performed very, very well, did an outstanding job. Thank you.
Okay.
Christopher Riley.
Do you have fatalities?
So at this point, the information that I can tell you is that we have 115 Colorado Springs Police Department resources here on scene, in addition to 8 victims advocates that are working with us through this situation. We have the El Paso County Sheriff's Office, the Federal Bureau of Investigations, the University of Colorado at Colorado Springs Police Department, the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Bureau, the Colorado Bureau of Investigations, and we also have regional explosive units here on scene. As I stated earlier, the individual brought some items into the building with him, and that we have to work with our EOD units, our explosive ordnance units, to make sure that none of those items are a further hazard to the people on scene. At that point, then, we are going to have to treat this as a crime scene. We are going to have to go through, we are going to have to identify if there are any individuals on scene that are injured and have not been transported, or individuals on scene that are deceased. We do not have any numbers at this point. The only thing that I can tell you is that there were 11 people that were transported to local hospitals. Of those 11 people, 5 of them were police officers from various agencies that have responded today.
Do you know if there are any fatalities?
I do not have any confirmation of fatalities at this point. Again, as I said, we're going to have to work through the scene because we are now treating it as a crime scene and investigating it. We did get an individual in custody at 4:52 p.m. in our time zone here. That individual has been transported away from the scene, and obviously we're going to start our investigation from there. Okay, I need to, questions at a time. Steve.
Question, was the suspect shot at all? Is he injured? Or
A live presser by the U.S. Colorado Springs Police Department spokeswoman, and also the mayor, who spoke earlier about the whole shooting incident, they actually confirmed that they do have the suspect in police custody. They still don't know about the number of casualties, and they also talked about further measures that will be taken, investigations into the crime scene and as to what the motive of the shooter was. We'll be keeping an eye on that story for you right here on Press TV. And we're going back to our second story about the demonstrations being held in the US city of Chicago, condemning the police killing of an African-American teenager. With us from Washington, D.C. is Dr. Randy Short. He's with the Black Autonomy Network Community org. Thank you very much, Dr. Short, for joining us here on Press TV. And, well, you just heard about this other story, our main headline story about the shooting incident, and, of course, this one about the killing of African Americans, which is becoming so common. What can you tell us about this specific story, and what do you think is the reason why? Well, this specific police officer, he was charged, but we know that there are many incidents where police officers get away with the killings of African Americans.
Well, in the case of Chicago, an unsung hero is a gentleman by the name of Lorenzo Davis. He's a former supervisor for Chicago's Independent Police Review Authority. He got fired in July because he refused to cover up for officers who had murdered 3 innocent civilians. So that's one thing. And so this man has lost his job, an African-American who wouldn't cover up for the police. And of course, a journalist was able to force the release of a tape that showed this young man, LaQuan McDonald, being shot down by Van Dyke, shot 16 times, and Van Dyke was trying to reload his gun so he could continue to shoot him. He was a 16-year-old boy. He didn't do any of what he was accused of, which was trying to stab the officers. In fact, the police had the local Burger King and other establishment destroy their closed-circuit camera film, which would have exonerated him. In reality, what's going on is a massive cover-up to allow the racist Zionist Jew mayor of Chicago, Rahm Emanuel, son of a terrorist. His father helped blow up the King David Hotel in Israel, killing over 90 people. He would have lost the election had the black community known that this boy was executed. And there are other executions. There are other tapes. There is the audio where, pardon my language, the officer Van Dyke said, "Hold that nigger down, I'm going to kill him." So the city of Chicago has always had very tense ethnic politics. So in election, there's been a cover-up, there's been fraud by Rahm Emanuel, the former chief of staff for Barack Obama, also the same man that introduced an Israeli agent called Monica Lewinsky into the Clinton White House to upset America's negotiations for Palestine and Israel. So Rahm Emanuel is a very corrupt person. He also has a corrupt state's attorney named Alvarez and a crooked chief of police named McCarthy, as well as crooked African-American ministers who saw this tape and colluded to help Rahm Emanuel win the mayoralty. He just won a few months ago in a closely contested election in which a Latin American named Chewy had a chance of winning. So this is corruption from the top of the system, from the city of Chicago to the bottom. And in reality, what the people are protesting for is they want Rahm Emanuel to get a federal indictment, State's Attorney Alvarez to get an indictment, as well as McCarthy, the chief of police, to get an indictment. And this needs to happen from the FBI ASAP. And this shooting, there's another tape of another young man that was killed in a similar fashion. This gives credence to a concern of black Chicagoans that many of the murders that you're hearing about from Chicago are police acting as death squads, murdering African Americans and making it look as if it's black on black crime. And of course, these cases never get investigated or solved. Are you understanding me? So people are very upset. And Black Friday, the history of Black Friday, it was a day in which you could buy 2 African people for the price of one as slaves. And it's a major day for commerce. And thank God, many, many African Americans have refused to support capitalism and racism today. And also, what we also need to know is that the Israelis have a group called JINS, the Jewish Institute for National Security Affairs. They train the Chicago police. So the same sort of torture that you see in Gaza and what happens to people in the occupied territories now happens to African Americans in cities like Chicago. They have a place called Holman Square, where it was found in February. They abduct and torture people as well. Chicago has a history. There's a man who got convicted many years ago, Officer Burge, who tortured hundreds of African Americans, Israeli style, putting electrodes on people's genitalia and shocking them into confessing, committing crimes of murder. Over 200 people had to be released. The city of Chicago had to pay out $37 million, and there's also more money.
Well, Dr. Short, we'll have to leave it there. Unfortunately, we are running out of time. Dr. Randy Short with the Black Autonomy Network Community Org joining us from Washington. It was a great pleasure to talk to you.
Okay.